years we brought you the news. Printed the info, we gave you the clues. Owners' profits were always sky high.
Hey everyone, welcome to Navel Gazing, the Valley Indy podcast. My name is Eugene Driscoll, and I'm the sole full-time reporter and editor for the Valley Independent Sentinel. That's a nonprofit online newspaper covering Ansonia, Derby, and Seymour in Connecticut's lower Naugatuck Valley. Please visit the site at valleyindy.org. The music you just heard, that is Ride the Dinosaur by the Bad Slugs. The lead singer is Ken Dixon, a locally famous state reporter for Hearst, Connecticut. So we got that going for us. FYI, quick programming note, The Great Give is coming up May 4th and May 5th, 2022. I ask you to please donate to the Valley Indy so that I can continue to deliver stories and podcasts such as the one you're about to hear. My guest this week, and I'm very excited and very happy to have him, is none other than Thomas Hennick, the Public Education Officer at the state's Freedom of Information Commission. Welcome to the broadcast, Mr. Hennick.
It's Tom, and thank you, Eugene. Thanks for inviting me. We love doing these.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun. We've done this in the past, and basically what I'm going to do is throw out some real-world, Valley-related FOI situations that I've encountered. But before we do that, Tom, I called you Mr. Hennick because you've certainly earned the title, at least when as compared to me. But I found this bio. I stole this from a program you participated in. It was called FOI in the Pandemic Age, hosted by the Connecticut Bar Association.
Okay.
So if you're going to steal a bio, steal it from a bunch of lawyers.
Right.
Tom conducts FOI seminars and workshops all over Connecticut about the ins and outs of the state open government laws. He was born and raised in Naugatuck. So
I'm a Valley guy. Yep.
A Valley guy. That's why you decided to do this. I appreciate that. You were a newspaper reporter. I don't know if you're aware of this, and an editor from 1976 to 2001. Tom worked at the Middletown Press, the Naugatuck Daily News, where he was the executive editor and assistant publisher. He was a regional editor at the Waterbury Republican American from 1994 to 2001. He's been on all sides of the FOI coin, so to speak, because he's a member of the Durham Board of Selectmen. I didn't realize this.
That's actually in the past. I was for 2 years. That it was filled an unexpired term that ended in 2019.
Look at that! I got that wrong. Okay, I was going to say I didn't know if I could. I was doubting you a little bit. He's everywhere.
It was accurate then. It's just not now. That's all.
And you're the former chairman of the Regional School District 13 Board of Education.
That's correct.
I like that this is your life. He's a 1972 graduate of the Taft School in Watertown and a 1976 graduate of Brown University.
Right on.
So again, Tom's been on this podcast several times in the past. We've done these FOI quizzes, and it's always an eye-opening experience, at least on my end. So I haven't gone over any of these scenarios with Tom in advance in any way. And this is a conversation on a podcast, so I just want to throw out there for anybody listening, this isn't a court of law. This isn't a formal proceeding. As far as I know, none of this is binding, but I hope it's just informational. Is there anything you want to add, Tom?
The key, you just, when I do my workshops around the state, Eugene, I tell people, and I'm not an attorney and I'm not a commissioner, so it's stressing, this is not binding. This is just my opinion. I've been doing this. I'm in my 22nd year, but it's just my opinion based on the facts as presented. I spend most of my time in the office answering questions on the phone or answering emails from folks, and the answer is based on the facts as presented. Many times I'll get questions from both sides of an issue, and both sides will walk away happy and somebody's got the wrong answer, but it's based on how the facts are presented. So I can only answer based on what you've told me.
Yeah, and that's, as I've been a reporter since 1998, at least paid to be a reporter, and there's nothing black and white is like the one thing I can take away in all those years. So I do think, it is important to stress that. These are just two people talking. I always reserve the right to be wrong, which maybe people don't want to hear since I'm a reporter, but it's just the way it is. All right, here we go. You ready? Question number one.
Got it.
If I have some sound effects, I could probably play. Oh, no, those are probably foul-mouthed. But question number one for Tom Hennick. Is there any requirement in the FOI Act that forces towns to post agendas online, such as a municipal website?
Okay, now this is the law, so there's a yes answer and a no answer there. Pre-pandemic, pre-March 2020, the answer was only for a special meeting. Only for a special meeting. So the regularly scheduled meetings, there was no requirement that the agendas be posted on any website. Just as an aside, if historically, back in 2008, the legislature passed a provision that required that. Many towns, especially the smaller ones, balked. They said, we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the personnel. The legislature said, fine, thanks for telling us, and then passed it anyway. And less than 2 years later, they rescinded it for municipalities. They kept it in place for state agencies, but rescinded it for municipalities except for special meetings, calling it, you know what, on second thought, it's an unfunded mandate. But by then, many towns, many communities, even the small ones, had gotten websites up and running and found that it was far more efficient to post them than not. But as far as requirements, up until March of 2020, no. Now, the paradigm changed if you are having a virtual meeting. If you're having a meeting that is entirely virtual, entirely remote, or even what they're calling the hybrid form of a meeting, if you're having that, then you must post it online because you've got to have the Zoom link or the WebEx link or the Teams link, whatever platform you're using, to make it available so that there is real-time access for everybody.
Interesting. Okay, so now we're at the point where a lot of the towns locally that I cover are transitioning back to in-person meetings.
Right.
So let's say they abandon Zoom, they abandon YouTube. At that point, once they do that and they hold old-fashioned in-person meetings, they no longer have to put that agenda on the website?
Correct. No longer required under FOI. Now, they may have established a policy that would require that. And again, that's regular meetings only. Special meetings still must be on the website.
Now, this is really outside of both of our jurisdictions here. Is anybody in the state going to make this why can't this should be, of all the things in the state, FOI related and open government related, you think this would be one that would be a requirement at this point? They tried it, like you said, in 2008. The little towns had like a little crying fit from what I remember, a bunch of babies saying, oh, we can't do that, it's too hard. Is there anybody trying to mandate, and I'll use the word mandate, darn it, that towns have to put their agendas online in 2022? Shouldn't that be a rule?
You would think that would have surfaced between 2010 when they rescinded it and now, it hasn't. I would think the extent to which people use websites today, it would be a logical thing, and frankly, it wouldn't be that big a deal because most people are doing it anyway. But at this point, I know of nothing that has surfaced, that has bubbled up, that would require it.
And I just want to give a shout out, since I just criticized. I mean, my fear is that all the towns are going to stop posting their stuff online, which shouldn't be the way. But City of Derby, just to shout somebody out, they've been sort of the gold standard during the pandemic, posting their agendas, agenda packets, and then after the meetings, the actual audio and video have all been going online, which has been great. Okay, question 2.
Sure.
And I think I know the answer because you might have just answered it. Is there any requirement that mandates towns to post agenda packets online? By agenda packets, I mean the supporting documentation for the items that are listed on a meeting agenda.
Good question, because there's some confusion about that too. When the governor issued his executive orders in March of 2020, that was a requirement under the governor's orders. But when those expired last June, that requirement went away. So as we sit here today, the answer to the question is no. It was in place when the governor's order, for the year that the governor's orders, give or take a month or so, were in place. But once the legislature took it over, that requirement was removed.
Interesting. Okay, so there is the answer there. My next question has 2 parts. We hear the word personnel matter used a lot by towns as a reason they can't comment on a particular issue. My first question, are personnel files public records in the state of Connecticut?
Yes.
Second, if possible, what is the procedure a town is supposed to go through or supposed to follow when it comes to reviewing requests for personnel files?
That's a good question. The answer is long. I hope we don't put people to sleep, but I'll give it to you.
I'll start dancing.
There's a 1993 state Supreme Court case. It's called the Perkins decision. Perkins was a teacher, may still be a teacher, who objected to the release of her attendance records. The matter went to the FOI Commission. They said release them. It went all the way to the state Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, no, the attendance records of all of us who work in the public sector are public records, period, end of story. To have been an invasion of her privacy, the release of those records would have to have been both highly offensive and not a matter of public concern. It would need to meet both prongs of that test. So when a request is made for a personnel file, the HR person or the mayor, whoever's in charge, is supposed to look at that personnel file, at the actual documents, and say, would this be highly offensive and not a matter of public concern? And if the person in charge believes that it would be, he or she goes to the employee and says, do you want to object? And if the employee says, oh, I don't care, then out it goes. If the employee says, yes, I do believe it's an invasion of my privacy, give it out, don't give it out. Then the process stops until or unless the requester makes a complaint with the FOI Commission and the commission overrules the municipality or the state agency. The key there is that many HR people, many people in charge just automatically say no without looking at the actual records. The complaint is filed and the complaint goes against the municipality, even though the municipality never looked at the records. So I don't care. There's no invasion. You've got to do the review. The employee only has the right to be contacted before the release if they believe it's an invasion of privacy. If you're going to release them, there is no other requirement, and the record is released with a heads up to the employee. Look, the Valley Indy looked for your personnel files. We didn't see anything that was an invasion of privacy. We order them released. So
let me just ask you then, so does the employee have to be notified? If I ask a city and the person in charge looks at it and says, well, this is obviously not an invasion of any kind by any reasonable method, can the person just, or the government just give me the records and then say, oh, by the way, employee, we released it? Or does it have to be,
No, the first scenario, if there's no invasion of privacy, they're supposed to give the records out and then give the employee a heads up.
That's very interesting because I don't think locally that's the way it's done. But that's why we're having this conversation.
But Eugene, one of the problems is just that employers, supervisors are hesitant to do it because they fear employee backlash. But if and I get that. Believe me, I get that.
And they'll cite the unions.
But the law says otherwise.
And that the Perkins law, I guess Matt Kaufman was the current investigative reporter. I don't know if you were familiar with him.
Yes, oh sure, I know Matt.
And he was sort of the, I rip off, every time I do a personnel request, I rip off his FOI nomenclature or whatever, his letter, I'm trying to say.
Right. I'll tell you a little funny. I do these workshops around the state, and I was doing one in the town, and I start talking about Perkins, and it was on Zoom, and a couple people, I see them nodding their heads, and I said, "What are you nodding?" They said, "She's from our town." So, I make my rounds. I go all around the state. So
that's great. Okay, question 4. We're moving right along here. Let's say, and this may or may not be torn out of my personal experience here. Let's say you file a complaint against a town, or I'm a private citizen, and I file a complaint against a town or city based on what I believe to be a violation of the FOI Act. I'm assigned a hearing officer because I've brought it up to the commission, and prior to a FOI commission hearing, the town offers to settle this by holding an FOI workshop for all town employees. As long as I agree to drop the complaint, they're not really admitting anything wrong, but we can settle it. And I think it's a reasonable offer because what's the goal here? You don't want to spend taxpayer money on attorneys necessarily, but an FOI workshop, that's a great, reasonable way to settle this dispute that I may have had with a city. But what recourse do you have if the town never follows through, if they go ahead and just never have the FOI workshop and carry on their merry way?
You would. Now, this is your settlement. This is not an ordered workshop.
Yes.
Then, the recourse would be to refile the complaint, I'm afraid. Would be to say, look, you guys promised to do this, you didn't do it. And it's not a big deal. You read the bio there. I do these workshops. I do about 100 of them a year going around the state. It's not a big deal. You call me up, I come out, and you have to sit through listening to me talk for a while, but it's not a difficult thing. I'm disappointed to hear you say that. Most people do follow up and do schedule them, and we do hold them. But if it had been a commission order to do the workshop, you could file a non-compliance complaint. But your negotiations with them, your discussions with them, are not anything that we would be able to sort of enforce.
Is there, and now I'm curious because I'm learning. I didn't realize that was an option to refile. Now, if this settlement was made is there a statute of limitations, so to speak?
If it is, I should have qualified that. If it is a records issue, if it is, you ask for the records again, and then you start the new clock. Unfortunately, if it were a meetings problem, there's a 30-day window before you can file a complaint. So if the meeting, you settled it and the meeting was a year ago and you realize they never had the workshop, you're out of luck on a meeting situation.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you for that. Moving on, we have 2 questions submitted by reader Tom Harbinson of Shelton. Now, Tom put something on the Valley Indy Facebook page. All heck broke loose this morning, Tom, so I'm going to apologize in advance. You posted a lengthy question. I'm an idiot. I couldn't translate it all. So I'm going to do your second question first, Tom, if you're listening. And this asks, if a board of aldermen is the same party, when they meet as a quote-unquote caucus, do they have to state that? I see a lot of content occur with a rubber stamp feel rather than any public discussion at all. It has lately trended into simply read the motion and vote yes, no. That worries me.
It's a legitimate worry, but when the legislature put this law together, remember that legislators are politicians. They created the caucus provision, which basically removes the caucus from the meeting provisions, which require notice and agendas and things like that. So it allows members of the same board and the same party to caucus. And it does create situations like your reader, like your listener, Tom, pointed out. When people get into trouble with the caucus, it's, well, let's have the town chairman visit us too and join the caucus, or let's have the chairman of the Board of Finance join the alderman's caucus. And once you do that, it's not a caucus anymore; it's a meeting. But same board, same party, they're within their rights. It's a giant loophole in the concept of open government, but they are within their rights if it's only same board, same party. And there's no limits on what they can talk about. They can do anything they need to do. And if it's the majority of the board, clearly they can set the agenda and set things up to move the way they want it to.
Okay, thank you for that. And then the second question is from Tom, and this is the one that I might butcher. In general, Tom is asking about the email requirements for commissions, because he's a member of, I believe he's on the Conservation Commission. Let me just read it from him. He says, this is a method / platform we use on the Shelton Conservation Commission regarding emails. It works exceedingly well. And he provided a link. I think what he does is they don't email each other. If somebody has a question for another member of the commission, and I'm butchering this, it gets posted to like a Google website, a Google page that I believe all the members can access, but they're not communicating with each other. I think that's what Tom was trying to say. And he says, I'd be interested in the FOI Commission giving an update regarding electronic quote-unquote meetings. It seems difficult in this day and age to think that an email that reaches a quorum of members is considered a meeting. Still, if that remains the opinion, this is how we have worked around that. And he references his...
Okay. Workarounds are always dangerous. I don't know specifically what this is. This sounds familiar. I bet I've spoken to your reader.
He said, yeah, I think you have years ago.
I don't discourage board members, commission members from using email. But when they email each other, they need to understand that what they can't do is have the conversation. The definition of a meeting says whether in person or by means of electronic equipment. Electronic equipment was written 47 years ago for the telephone, but now it's much more. Obviously, it's the email, it's the text, it's Twitter, the Facebook. You can send out information, you can disseminate information. You can take an article from the Valley Indy and send it to everybody and say, look, guys, I want you to read this. We're going to talk about this. Eugene has a great idea. We're going to talk about it at the next meeting.
Never happens.
That's fine. That's fine. But the issue becomes when they start talking about it via email. That they can't do. They cannot have the conversation. They cannot have the deliberations that they should be having at the table. But posting something for everybody to read is fine. Then hold back on the comments. Don't start having, because then you're having the meeting and then you've opened yourself up. You're vulnerable to a complaint that you've met improperly, unnoticed via electronic equipment.
And then just to again repeat the caveat, Tom had I'm not doing justice to his question or his process that they're using there. I just want to state that for the record. I apologize, Tom, but still I wanted to have this conversation because it's coming up elsewhere. In one of the towns I cover, there's a new tax board, and they're trying to be efficient. They're trying to stop the days of 16-hour tax board meetings where you're just kind of getting to the muck and mire, and mistakes can be made and things are transposed the wrong way. So they're doing, if they have questions, they'll meet for 2 hours, and then if they have questions for, say, the chief of staff, it's Derby, in the city of Derby, they're emailing things to, I believe, the town clerk. It's sort of a new way to, and they're I think they're putting them on the agenda, or they're saying they're going to put them on the agenda. Is that something that can be done? Are we seeing more of that in the state?
I don't know if we're seeing more, but the idea of sending all the questions to somebody to either get answered or to be posted, again, that's fine, especially if it's a staff person. There's no issue with that, with the understanding that when you do that, email, text, all those things, they become public records. They're not secret. Again, Valley Indy wants to see them. You can get them. But the key, as far as the meeting provision, is don't have the conversation. You want to send questions to a town official. This is let's suppose you're Conservation Commission and you want to send it to the land use coordinator. You send him a bunch of questions. He sends them back to the board. Of course, you send them to all the board members. That's all fine. But it's the communication that starts the snowball rolling down the hill, creates a problem.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, Tom, those were all my questions. That's pretty much the whole thing. What I wanted to ask you is to state how people can get in contact with you if they have a question or if they want to come speak to one of their groups. I know you do that a lot. That's
free advertising. Thank you. First of all, the phone.
The what?
I answer phone calls. 860-566-5682. Now somebody will answer that phone. That's the main number. We do that because I'm on the phone so much, or I'm on the road. But I promise you, and Eugene, you can testify to this, I will call you back. Mm-hmm. Hopefully within the day, if not the next day. You can also email a question to Thomas, THOMAS, .Hennick, HENNICK @ct.gov. And I stress that when you call and ask questions, I'm not giving you an order or a command in response. I'm telling you what I think based on my knowledge, what I've been doing, other experiences. If I don't know, I'm not afraid to say I don't know. I'll ask one of the attorneys or one of the executives, what do they think? But even then, we're writing back and we're saying, this is what we think based on the facts that you've presented. And you can say, okay, so that's what they think. We're going to do something else, but at least gives you a basis upon which to make a decision. And the same phone number and the same email address would work if you want me to come out and do a workshop. As I said, I do them all over the state. I was in Avon last night, and I did one earlier in the afternoon for the Connecticut Association of Zoning Enforcement Officers. There were a lot of them. I guess the state changed the certification requirements for them, so it was a much bigger crowd than I had done with them before. It was great. We had both sessions were terrific. But big group, small group, happy to do it. Just call and we'll set it up.
All right, Tom, I want to thank you again for taking the time. I know you're incredibly busy, so I truly appreciate your time here today. And I also appreciate what you do, as a reporter, sometimes asking about FOI related issues. It's not personal, like even with the towns, it's not personal, but
right.
It's such a great tool for the public to have and to know it's available. And the fact that you're there to provide guidance to it, because it could be very confusing, is really a great thing. I mean, God bless America, not to get totally, but it's just a great thing.
I thank you for that. And I stress to folks, a lot of times people say, well, that's a law for the media only, but it's really the percentage of complaints that we get from media outlets like yourself is fewer than 10%. This is a law for the people. government doesn't work if people don't know what's going on. People who mean to be their own governor, James Madison said, I forgot the exact words, without information are destined to fail. So people need to have that information. And that's what the important thing of our law is, to make sure that people are informed so that they can vote when the elections come around, that they can vote on a budget, so they can do those sort of things and do so intelligently. So I thank you for that. And remember, this is a law for everybody.
All right. With that, thank you, Tom.
You are welcome. Have a good afternoon.
You too.
For hundreds of years we've brought you the news. Printed the info, we gave you the clues. Owners' profits were always sky high. Changing market now threatens our lives. Post-literation, critical reading, dumbed down nation, signs have been breeding. TV sucking ideas from our head. Public discourse just about dead. We'll ride the dinosaur. Yeah, ride the dinosaur. Our readers are in the opens each day.